I think everybody who's ever used a computer discovers that they are very unforgiving animals. And very often, if you've done something wrong, it takes you an awful long time to discover what.
For a small organisation with very few staff and very limited resources, it gives us an edge that we didn't have before.
Having been sold on the technology and using it for work, which I do, I tend to use it for play as well, which makes me almost a hermit.
It's a fantastic hobby. When you think about it, for the price of a stamp and a box of cornflakes, you could win a trip to Japan. It's amazing, isn't it?
So we've bought a computer, or maybe we haven't, but we're interested. In this series, we certainly won't try to baffle you with jargon, nor will we bore you to tears with news of the latest hardware. What we will do is let other people tell you their stories. You don't need a degree in computer programming to enjoy the benefits of a micro. All you need to know is what you want it to do, then find out how to operate it. So, if the users aren't all whiz kids, who are they? One is the Very Reverend John Allen, Provost of Wakefield.
A provost is head of the cathedral. I'm head of the staff at the cathedral here in Wakefield. He is also the senior priest in the diocese underneath the bishops, so that as well as looking after what goes on in the cathedral, he does all sorts of other jobs around the diocese and perhaps plays a role in the management of the whole Church of England in a way. It's like running a small business in a sense. You've got to keep the show on the road, you've got to keep the accounts up together, you're looking after a medieval building, and medieval buildings take an awful lot of looking after, believe you me, and you have to keep your eye on things that need doing in that sort of way and find the funds to do it. You need to run a very large team of people. We have a paid staff that is comparatively small, but about 100 volunteers.
Reverend Allen is obviously very busy, so how does a computer help?
So much of my work is to do with words and lists. I wanted a computer and a word processor of one sort or another, but I was waiting for something that would give me a complete package. I bought an electric typewriter, and that speeded things up, yes. But what you can't do on the typewriter is edit what you're doing very easily. I know you can on some of the modern ones, but I hate to say it, but the advertising is true when they tell you that with this particular machine that I've got, which is very much the cheapest word processing machine of its sort on the market, I can get more for my money than I could by buying a typewriter. I find it very helpful when I'm producing magazines or when I'm writing articles. I find it very helpful when I am dealing with the enormous number of lists that go with the sort of job that I've got. The other main use, from my point of view, is the business of special services. Part of the operation of a cathedral is to lay on all sorts of special services for people who need them, either for the Diocese of Wakefield as a whole, confirmation services, ordination services, and so on and so forth. And all of these have to be written. To do it on the word processor is much easier than doing it by hand because you can keep the various elements on disk and simply feed them in and build up your service in a quick and easy way. We will produce a master copy and use that to print off an entirely new order of service for each occasion. And it's very much cheaper than going out to a printer. We can afford to produce a master copy and a proper order of service, even for quite small services that are going on. They can take them away and have them as a memento of an occasion that they've enjoyed.
Reverend John Allen also uses his computer to produce a more professional parish magazine. But he isn't alone. There are many other people in the church who use computers for similar work. There is a way in which they can pool their information and ideas.
There is, in fact, a thing called the Church Computer Users Group, which has been running now for 2-3 years, very nearly. That's very much a corresponding group, an exchange of information group. They managed to arrange a number of discounts around the place, but basically it's an exchange of information group. There is a magazine that comes out monthly, which we share, and that's a very valuable thing because it is people who are using their computers in the same sort of field. I think most of my parishioners have noticed a much more professional output of material in the cathedral that we're using. I think they're aware of the fact that one of the other results of this is that I actually take on a great deal more work, and they see me doing a lot of different things that perhaps I wasn't doing before.
We'll probably hear comments like that throughout the series. The computer has released me from the paperwork and I can get on with the business I'm supposed to do. The computer can deal with a whole host of different jobs, but if you just want to deal with words, the dedicated word processor is another option. Fola Khan chose that option when she started to produce a magazine called Enterprise. Fola has won many competition prizes over the years, including freezers, colour televisions, holidays around the world. In fact, she even won the money to buy a house in London. The magazine is produced for thousands of hopeful people who enter these competitions week in, week out. It provides answers to questions, help with slogans, and information on how you can enter. Fola has a knack for getting things right, but with so much experience, does the prospect of winning still excite her?
I don't enter competitions anymore. I don't even miss it. What I really like is the research. I absolutely adore that side of it. So I thought the best thing I could do was to move on and provide a service for competitors. It's mainly based on research. I provide factual answers to lots of competitions, and we give it news of new competitions that are coming out. We send out entry forms. We produce little booklets. At any one time, there are anything up to, say, 150 competitions running each month. The most popular one is the factual competition. Now, anyone would think that you say factual competition, you must get the right answer, there's only one answer, but that isn't so. Sometimes we find that reference works vary, all sorts of things, and come up to stop us getting the right answer. But when we do get the right answer, it's very exciting. Now, another very popular competition is Order of Merit. Now this is, you'll say, take 7 features of Mr. Blogg's soap powder and you've got to put them in order of importance to the housewife using Mr. Blogg's. Now we study these a lot, and so we have slightly better idea than the person coming new to it and just thinking, oh, I'll put them in any old order, because we do know what the trend, what judges will often choose as the most popular thing. To run a good solutionist business, I need a great deal of help. And the most important person is my husband, George. We have an enormous amount of knowledge that we have to have at our fingertips, and he copes with most of that. We have about 3,000 books, and we need them all.
Enterprise magazine contains a lot of information which needs updating constantly, but the research isn't the only work which needs to be done. Production of the magazine also involves many hours of work at the keyboard. Words are added and changed as the research reveals the correct answers for the would-be winners. The workload is high, but the word processor makes life a lot easier for Fola and her secretary, Carol.
Because we're so busy, and Carol and I are always trying to get on the same word processor at the same time, I thought, right, I shall get another Word Pro. I'll have a brand new program, smashing. The thing I didn't realise is that technology has advanced so much that they were totally incompatible. At the moment, there seems to be too many people all trying to overtake each other. And maybe they'll have come to some sort of conclusion, maybe there'll be more compatibility, but certainly I think I've made a big mistake now.
Computers are incompatible when the information on one cannot be directly transferred to the other. Compatibility is one of a number of things to be considered when choosing what to buy, and we'll be getting advice about that later on in the series. Now, if I asked you who would be the most obvious person to use a word processor, I'm sure you'd say an author. John Gardner has written 7 James Bond books since the death of Ian Fleming. His other books are also about espionage and the secret world. On average, he completes 2 novels a year.
To be a writer of fiction is the most privileged job there is. I think who else gets a chance to sit down and tell himself stories all day, which is what I do. I get up, I'm at my desk by 10, I deal with the mail first, and then I write with a lunch break. I write until about 8 in the evening. If it's going well, I'll come back and do some more. And I work 7 days a week. I have a central idea, central character, and I start working towards the middle of the book If I get to the middle of the book and I don't know the end, I'm in trouble. But I don't know the end when I start. I don't want to, because I want to surprise myself, because if I surprise myself, then there's a fair chance that I'm going to surprise the reader. I'm a notoriously bad speller. I used to get through 3 dictionaries a year. I'm getting better. But now you don't have to worry about that because you've got spell checkers.
A spell checker is usually bought as part of a word processing program. It's an electronic dictionary which checks through your text to see if anything is misspelt. It highlights errors for you to correct.
I did try a dedicated word processor and found that you really needed 4 people to operate that. 1 to do the typing and 3 to carry the manuals. But Apple, thank God, is not like that. You have the copy on the screen in front of you. You can whip bits out, you can put bits in, you can take words out here and lines out there and sort of just rejig it very quickly on the screen. For instance, this book, The Secret Generations, which is a long book, I overwrote, and 25% had to be cut, which is a lot of words to cut out of a manuscript, and would normally, with a typewriter and scissors and paste, have taken me about 6 or 7 weeks. It took me about a week to do it. I bought the Macintosh because I felt that computing was moving into icon technology, and it was the first of the big icon machines. I find it very interesting to use it. And I use it for writing letters, actually, because they look very smart when they come off the laser printer. If I'm working on a big book, as I am at the moment, the second book in this trilogy, which the first one was The Secret Generations, the one I'm doing now is called The Secret Houses, it deals with 2 families, a British family and an American family, connected with the diplomatic world, connected with the military world, connected with the secret world. And so there are a lot of characters. Therefore, I have to know who does what. I have to know who picks his nose and who did this, that, and the other, and what their general traits are. And so I keep all the characters on a database file. And if I get stuck, as I did yesterday, actually, I'd forgotten what a code name for one girl was. And I had to go to the database and find out exactly what the code name was, because I'd forgotten. I'd have had to look through pages and pages of stuff, you know. It is the magic of technology, and I'm the first sucker, you know. Someone comes out with some new gadget, and that's me. I'm down at the store and I'm buying it, and I buy a lot of software that becomes discarded because I don't use it for work.
For relaxation, John plays adventure games on one of his collection of computers. He claims he's just a child at heart, so when he's really tired, he simulates landing and taking off in an aeroplane, and that sends him straight off to sleep. But what sort of reaction has he had to the James Bond books?
To show you how dumb I am, the first Bond book I didn't think about it, didn't think twice about it. It was only when the book came out I realized that James Bond was a huge international character. And then the mail started to come in by the sackful, you know, and started, "Dear sir, thank you very much for bringing back our hero James Bond. However," you know, you get letters from all over the place, from MPs, from doctors, from kids in school. And that's nice. You get a lot of feedback from it. Now, I think it's great. I'm very happy doing the job I'm doing and feel very pleased that people pay me to do it.
John Gardner seems to live with his computer by his side 7 days a week. But is it wise to spend so much time sitting in front of the screen? Brian Pearce, a research fellow at Loughborough University of Technology, is a consultant on ergonomics, health and safety issues. Brian, can a situation like John Gardner's cause health problems?
It can do. I'm certain those people don't have any health problems at all. They all thoroughly enjoy working with their systems, and I'm pretty certain they wouldn't have any difficulties at all. But there are circumstances under which people may experience some increased fatigue or discomfort.
And what are those circumstances?
Well, essentially when they haven't got jobs that they enjoy doing. That's the fundamental aspect of it. But there's also influences from the lighting, seating, the actual way the equipment is laid out, the design of the equipment itself. These can all influence the amount of fatigue and discomfort that someone can experience when working with one of these terminals.
So if your brother-in-law was going to buy a computer, what sort of advice would you give him on this issue?
Well, firstly, I think I'd tell him to go and get his eyes tested. That sounds a bit funny, but it's been shown, many surveys have shown, that up to 30% of the working population have some sort of uncorrected or insufficiently corrected defect of vision. Now, we quite happily go about with that sort of slight defect. We're immensely adaptable. If you want to read something, then we move it around. When we start to work at a terminal, what can happen is that you actually use the terminal at a slightly longer reading distance than you would, say, use a piece of paper, and it's fixed. And that can highlight that undetected or insufficiently corrected defect of vision, and you'll start to experience eye fatigue or some form of discomfort. And quite naturally, people say, well, I didn't have this problem before I started work at the terminal. I've got it now. It must be the terminal that have caused it. Well, it hasn't actually caused it. It's just highlighted that which is there. But to avoid that problem, it's important that someone does have their eyes tested by an ophthalmic practitioner who will be knowledgeable about the sort of correction, the sort of work they do and the sort of correction they need to do that work. And that will overcome this very common misunderstanding that does occur. One also needs to pay attention to the positioning of the terminal with respect to lights. We need to avoid having bright sources of light shining on the screen causing reflection, or having the terminal, for example, directly up against a window, which you're asking the eye to look at that terminal and also to look at the bright source of light as well. Those are all things that will also influence eye fatigue. Another one that's quite unusual is the temperature or the actual thermal environment of the office. The amount of heat that these systems produce is not that much, but they can sometimes upset the very delicate thermal balance that you have. Or the other thing that happens is you often have a fan that's blowing out warm air from the equipment. Now, if that's blowing across someone's face, or you've actually changed the thermal balance, so you've changed, and the common thing that changes is the relative humidity, you can get more complaints of people suffering sore eyes or red eyes or gritty eyes. And one needs to make sure that you don't have this sort of hot air blowing in their face, or you've got problems with the relative humidity. In other words, you must not let it dry out, basically. This is a particular problem for contact lens wearers. But I emphasise these things are all avoidable, and they just need a little bit of thought before one starts. We also probably need to consider the seating, or the desk at which it's used at. I mean, typically you wouldn't want to use it at something like this, where you couldn't get your knees underneath it.
I wouldn't have thought so.
If you're going to want to do a lot of keyboarding. If you want to just do the odd, sort of press the odd button, it doesn't matter. But when you're trying to do a lot of intensive keyboard work, then you want to sit in a comfortable position. Now, there's many misconceptions about what is a comfortable position. You often see pictures of people with everything at right angles. I call that the bolt up through the bum posture. It doesn't actually... The essence of seating, or good seating, is that the body is built to move. And what we've got to stop doing is fixing people in one position. And so we need to be able to adjust our seating and the equipment to fit our posture, rather than adjust our posture to fit the equipment. Because when you adjust the body to fit the equipment, you end up fixing that person in that possibly awkward and constrained posture, and that's when you get increased problems of postural fatigue, stiff necks, stiff arms, stiff shoulders.
So to summarise, you'd say we have to watch the lighting, the heating and the position of the person with respect to the computer.
Yes.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Brian. Now, one person who certainly doesn't spend all her days in front of a computer screen is Maggie Smith. Maggie is the national organiser of Kiddie Care. Kiddie Care is a nursery scheme run by Gingerbread, a group with many drop-in centres which offer advice to single parents.
As most people involved in Gingerbread, I was a lone parent, and my first reaction was to try all the normal statutory services for help, and I went round and round in a circle, and no one seemed to look at my whole needs. So I went to the Gingerbread group thinking, well, this group's specially for lone parents, so it's bound to help me. And I was quite shocked to discover that I was supposed to help as well, that, you know, self-help is about you putting in. One of the best things that it did for me was put my problems in perspective. There was always someone there with a worse problem.
I think this fairly well covers what the matters that were raised at Newcastle, and
So would I be better, in fact, just giving the broad area and an example, but saying to people, please say it in your own words?
I think
Well, words are very important to me because I'm a very wordy person. I'm often criticised for saying too much, but I found it very difficult to express myself in writing when I first got involved with Gingerbread. It was like sweating blood. But they are important. You can verbally convince someone of the need to do something about lone parents, but they often ask for written reports and they want applications that actually do make sense. And those I struggled with a great deal. I know that throughout the years I've worked for Gingerbread that's been one of the hardest things. I've had to learn how to express myself in writing concisely and with all the information that people need, without them getting bored. I used old typewriters for years. We were a sort of graveyard for second-hand typewriters, and I can't type. People tell me I was the fastest one-finger typer in the country, but it still was difficult. And the other thing is I get impatient. I can't wait to write things longhand. So I used to compose straight onto the typewriter. But of course, I had to do 3 or 4 or even 5 retypes when I didn't like what I'd written or I hadn't put the right emphasis. The beauty with the processor is creating straight onto it. You can put it on the screen, you can look at it and read it and think, no, I want to change that. And without having to type it or print it out, you can cut out large pieces, put a new piece in. Incredible things. It just makes my life... It probably takes me half a day to do something that would take me 3 or 4 days. That's the biggest saving, is time. And the confidence that you just don't have to do all that horrible, hard work again. It's there. I'm not keen on machines and really not a mathematical kind of person, and I always thought you had to be to use a computer. I had the advantage of seeing one being used a few years ago, and it stuck in my memory. It was so clever. It could correct your spelling mistakes without having to retype a piece. So that stayed with me and made me interested enough to want to have one. By luck, I got a small grant. I needed to replace my typewriter anyway, and I took a big risk. I was worried about it, and then I looked at it and thought, oh, God, what have I done? I can't understand any of this.
Maggie isn't the first person to think that way. Everybody has to start somewhere. But how did she cope at first? Did the manuals help at all?
The manuals that came with it were horrific. I glanced at them and couldn't understand what on earth they were saying. The sheer look of the language and everything really put me off. So since then, I've never looked at the manuals at all. I found it easier to play with the machine, and once I was confident enough that I wouldn't break it or do something dreadful and it wouldn't explode, it beeped at me if I did anything wrong. I actually missed buses. I'd have to ring my children up and say, I'll catch the next bus. Because once you start to discover what it can do for you, you want to go on and on and on, because you're thinking, great, next week when I've got this document, I now know I can put this heading in this lovely way and it'll come out beautifully, and it's very difficult to put it down, very difficult. I'm beginning to realise the immense amount of functions that I don't yet know about. One of the things I've picked up on recently is projecting budgets and using spreadsheets, and I'm really excited by that. I'm also beginning to see that if a number of our groups had processors and our head office did, I would be able to send information down on a disk, which was much easier, and that they could adapt and send back to me. There are endless possibilities, and you get more and more excited when you realise what those are. I think it's got to come. I worry about unemployment as much as anybody, probably more than most, because lone parents have a harder task to get a job, but they need childcare often to release them to do that. But I think we've got to accept it. It is a kind of technological revolution we're going through. What I think is that we should accept it with open arms and be clear it releases us to do much more interesting things with our lives. There are jobs that need to be done, caring and working with people. Forget the rest, let the technology take over, and let's concentrate on lots of things that need doing.
Next week we have some facts on file. Filing systems that can store and analyse information literally dug out of the ground.